Today's unit of the course is Unit 4, Building a Web Culture Style Design Standards. And basically what I want to talk about here is what is web design? What does that mean when you create something for the web? And when you create something for the web, there's certain kind of style rules, just as if you're writing a paper for a history class or an English class. There are certain rules that govern your writing, whether to use a comma, a semicolon, capitalization, the kind of font, structure, whatever. The same kind of, there's a similar kind of design guideline that is in effect when you create something for the web. And you should first read Rosenzweig's textbook, which is the chapter 2, and his chapter 4. Both, first of all, one of the things they do is the authors talk about selecting an appropriate technology for your project. And we'll talk a little bit later about this in the course, but if your project is simple, you're just going to put something simply on the web, that requires a different kind of technology than if you're creating a very complicated a database project or something. I also have my notes for this week finally written up, and I cover first of all the Animoto and Timeline 3D, and then I talk a little, and then I have written here a little bit about different kind of tools you can use to create web materials, web content now. You have a lot more flexibility. At one time, basically, you needed to learn HTML coding before you could create anything for the web. Now there's all kinds of freely available web-based tools that allow you to create websites without knowing anything about coding or software structure or anything. And I've listed some of those there. There's literally hundreds of them now available. Some are better than the other. And then in my note, I have a few kind of standard comments about design style that I think are applicable that anything you do on the web. And the most important, of course, is the keep it simple, stupid, the KISS rule. Try and keep your design and the technology as simple as possible for what you're trying to accomplish. Now, there's a lot of different design guidelines out there. The Web Style Guide is probably the most authoritative and been around the longest time. There's all kinds of different websites that have what they call different principles of good design. And this is kind of an interesting thing because I think this particular website, even though it's called the Four Principles of Good Design for Website, and the principles are actually pretty good. Contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. This actual website isn't really that well done, and I don't think it really is a well-designed website, but those are four decent principles. My telephone is ringing from some idiotic pharmacy calling to remind something about picking up some sort of prescription. Let me just get rid of that. I don't know what's happening. It's going to go somewhere else. All right, back to principles of design. Here's another one, principles of design website. Basics, web design, balance, rhythm, proportion, dominance, unity. Yep, those are all kind of nice words. There's my old one, the Web Design Center, and this is like one of the things that um, I think is one of the key things about web design, one of the key principles in that space. Um, there's no reason to clutter up things, especially with ads and all kinds of links and everything. Try and keep it as simple as possible, and space is nice. Some people might not like space, but others will. I got some rules here. That's pretty nasty color contrast and everything. Um, But again, one of the key words, simplicity. Scrolling is a big no-no. You don't want to be scrolling left to right, especially on a web page and everything. So that's my new web designs. And then there's all kinds of different things about using color. And as you saw from my website, color is often a problem for me. As you can see from this website, color is a problem too. What I would like you to do is consider the websites that we looked at in Unit 3, the digital web. And these were all kind of like some of the key history web projects that have occurred in the last 15 years. And if you look at them, at each of these, you see there's a variety of different kind of design principles at work. And so, for example, the Avalon site, which is this gigantic collection of diplomatic and legal and political documents and everything, has a really simple, straightforward design and just a simple search function. The Oye, which at one time was kind of a simple structure like the Avalon project, is now much different because it now features videos, but it's still pretty much straightforward. But you see it's kind of difficult. The navigation, you're really unsure like how the navigation fits with the site and everything. The Valley of the Shadow, one of the early things, early history projects and everything. This is one of the most complicated navigation structures out there on the web, and I've always found it really difficult to figure out like where you're supposed to click in and find things. And so one of the key points about design standards is a site's navigation and how that navigation is set up and functions. And if that navigation is difficult or unclear and everything, it really makes the site difficult to use. And so I keep repeating that word difficult because as a user, if I can't figure out where I'm supposed to be going on a site, then the site is basically lost to me and everything. The Lascaux Cave site, this is beginning with a little animation here and everything. Then let's visit the grotto. You know, this is a beautiful site and everything, but if you don't have the bandwidth to use the site, you see you're going to have problems uh, fully appreciating the depths of the Lascaux site and everything. And so that's another design consideration you always have to keep in mind. And one of the things that gets back to my keep it simple and a lot of white space and everything is you have to consider bandwidth. And especially in this day when a lot of people are using mobile technology, iPads, and even more mobile phones to access web-based materials and everything, like the Lascaux Cave and everything is beautiful, but you try and use that on an iPhone or an Android phone and everything, it's not going to work very well. So that's yet another really crucial design criteria that you have to think about when you're considering what kind of how the materials are going to display and be used on the web and everything. Well, let's just take the Digital Karnak. This is a really nicely designed site and everything. But again, you know, the nav bar up here really doesn't do much for you figuring out how to navigate your way around the site and everything. So as you consider style design and web design and everything, if I could summarize, I think some of the key components of that is you got to match the technology to the project. Keep it as simple as possible. Consider space. Space is nice. Have an appropriate navigational structures that's inherently useful to the user. And then finally, this color thing, because if your color is all messed up, if you got pinks, browns, and blacks and everything, the site becomes basically unusable. Okay, thanks.